what the elephant population needs now is genetic diversity, and it also needs population stability, if not growth. And responsible tourism can provide the resources and the tools to really help with all of those things until we can get the rest of the world sorted out, and then we can delve into the world of rewilding, which is something that my organization has also helped to support in Laos. That's just a snapshot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. A lot of great points already that you shared, and I absolutely agree with what you said about conservation and community, and I think that's why it's really great to see also in the award program that we celebrate both planet and people, and those things often go hand in hand, as you all know, as well. So we would also like to welcome to the panel and also introduce Daniel Turner, who's the director of Animondia, and in the introduction before, it was already mentioned, your work has been instrumental in working together with EXO in setting up the animal welfare standard. And yeah, please also introduce yourself and share a little bit about your work.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning if you're in my side of the world. Thank you also to EXO and EXO Foundation, and particularly the sustainability team, for bringing this important event. And also I want to send my congratulations to all of the winners. Animondial, we were established in 2018, but prior to that, I was working a lot in establishing environmental protection policy, both in the European Union, in the Parliament there, and also through the Born Free Foundation, which is a wildlife organization. And when we established Animondial, the focus was to empower and upskill the travel and tourism sector, because from extensive experience working with them already, it was very clear that there was a need to improve knowledge and understanding as to how nature works and what is biodiversity and what is animal welfare and all of those elements. And ultimately what we do is support and empower travel and tourism professionals to understand the complexities of the topic through a simple and supportive process, and to help them minimize the impacts of animal welfare or poor animal welfare and nature depletion within the supply chain, and to kind of improve through tourism. So it's very much resonant with what is being promoted today, both from an animal welfare perspective with Ingrid and from a conservation perspective with Chris and Teresa, to really sort of empower tourism to build back better. And this was very much encapsulated within a process that we have created with the World Travel and Tourism Council, now endorsed by UN Tourism and the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance and the Sustainable Markets Institute. So that's kind of nice, and IUCN as well, which actually provides a process by which travel and tourism businesses can identify, assess, and prioritize their actions that will actually build back better and actually restore destinations around the world. So that's a little snapshot for me. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Daniel, and welcome to you as well. So what to start with, because I think one of the things that we all take away from the little introduction from all of you is that we're so impressed with the expertise that you bring to the world of conservation and as well as to sustainable tourism. One of the most important aspects of what we want to explore is really how can tourism, how can we use tourism to make sure that responsible travel is a part of the solution. And you've already mentioned a few points related to your work on this topic already, but to really focus on responsible tourism as a tool, we would like to hear from everyone about your example of how tourism is incorporated into your work and how tourism can be part of the solution, as mentioned. But to do so, Daniel, maybe I would like to start with you. Can you share a little bit more from your perspective? So what does it mean for tourism to be more nature positive? What does it look like? What are some of the key aspects of that?
Well, I think just to start with, it makes business sense, because if your business relies on nature, and I'll have to say every single business relies on nature, we all rely on nature, so if you recognize that, and please recognize that if your businesses or your practices are having an impact on the essence of nature, so the biodiversity, the ecosystems that produce the services that we all rely on, from food and water through to sort of pollination and tourism. Obviously, nature supports that. So you have to sort of understand that. Once you understand that, then it's sort of identifying what your impacts are, and then to identify your actions to focus on where your impacts are, not focusing on where anyone else's impacts are, because that will be a waste of time. The importance is to identify where your particular business impacts are, and then to direct your limited resources at focusing in on those impacts. And then once you've reduced your impacts, or at the same time, you can actually compensate for anything that's unavoidable. Travel businesses are ultimately very impactful on the natural environment. And so we need to sort of compensate through that sort of restoration element. Not doing so ultimately causes a business risk, because if you're highly dependent on nature, and as we know, nature is in a very depleted state, there is a massive decline in biodiversity, ecosystems are becoming unstable. This is a business risk. So it makes logical sense to go through those steps of identify impacts, assess them, prioritize them, because you will have different priorities, and then to actively work to reduce and restore in the destinations where you have the greatest impacts. Just as an interlude, is that I find from a lot of travel businesses, more so the outbound sector rather than the inbound sector, but there tends to be, let's Google a conservation project or rewilding project that we can support. And it may be in a completely different geographical zone to where they operate. That is not the right process. The right process is to focus on where your greatest impacts are, because ultimately what you're trying to do is minimize those impacts as much as possible. So this kind of logical process is what we have established, and at the COP15, which is the biodiversity COP, we established this process, and at COP16, which has just happened in Cali in Colombia, tourism had a big focus. We had the biggest representation from travel and tourism ever in the biodiversity COP, and in the climate COP, we had a whole day focused on travel and tourism. So this is, now people are starting to recognize that travel and tourism not just needs to minimize, but because they operate everywhere in all levels of society, is that tourism has this massive potential. I mean, it's huge potential to be a driver of change. And this is what Animundial and many others are doing to empower that process.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, I think just to echo on your point, I really like that you highlighted sort of, I guess, the other P, right? People, planet, profit. The business aspect of it is absolutely important. And I think that brings sort of a really strong connection to the tourism discussion as well, because obviously we are about making sure that the local economy benefits from tourism. And that's an important pillar of sustainability that, again, is interconnected with the people and the planet pillars as well. And I think that, as you highlighted, the importance of focusing on your impact. So what does your destination, what does your business have in terms of opportunity to create greatest impact? And I think that's also really important because travel is really about storytelling, right? So that's also an opportunity for you and your business, your organization, your destination to tell the story of your conservation effort, your community impact, which then resonates really with travelers and supporters as well. I guess I would like to then go to Ingrid, because you also kind of highlighted in your introduction already some of the ties to responsible travel specifically. So could you share a little bit of your example of how travel, responsible tourism, is part of the solution that you're working on in your example? Ingrid, you're muted.
I just realized, thank you. Yes, so we have seen some really, really positive and exciting camps that have exceeded any kind of expectation that you may have about elephant-based tourism throughout Southeast Asia through their responsible travel work that they do. I'll give you a really good example is the Elephant Conservation Centre in Sayaburi in Laos. I don't know if anyone's been there. If you know it, you have to go there, must-see destination. They have rewilded approximately 6 elephants into the nearby Nampui National Protected Area. And they have rescued at least a couple more dozen minimum that were to be shipped overseas to United Arab Emirates and various other places in the dead of night. And they, through responsible tourism, they have been able to keep these animals in country, and they're involved in very passive elephant-based tourism now. That's the pinnacle of what responsible tourism can bring for captive elephant populations. And as an organization, we look at other organizations. So we look at elephant camps. Not every elephant camp can do that. Not every business can do that. But every single business can do a little bit better for responsible tourism. So what we see when we look at elephant camps, they often they want to do better with responsible travel. They just don't know how. A lot of organizations just say, "I know we can do better." We don't really know what to improve or how to improve it. There's no guidebook necessarily. So that's where we come in, and we'll give them, in a sense, the guidebook and a checklist of things to look at. And it's not just about the elephants, like we were saying before. Responsible travel is so much more than that. Looking at the farmers, do you have good contracts with the farmers who have to supply the fodder, the daily fodder, the seasonal organic fruit and vegetable for all of these elephants that are there? So the benefits of that one particular camp or centre should extend well beyond the boundaries of that particular camp or centre as far as we're concerned. Some camps offer English lessons for the staff in their area, so they can improve their hospitality skills, their English, that they can then take back to their families. I know of camps in Indonesia that the daughters wouldn't be going to school if it wasn't for the income that had been brought in from responsible travel from these elephant centres. So it's more than just, we're all about changing that negative paradigm that elephant tourism has had for too many years now. Look at all these other benefits that are trickling down to the community in genuine ways that we really want to expose and champion. And all of the camps that we work with, they're champions in their field, and we're about bringing every other camp up to rise up to reach that level. That's what responsible travel is, and what I've seen it do for elephant conservation in Southeast Asia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for highlighting those points. I just wanted to echo and what you mentioned about we started this panel talking about how community is an important and integral part of conservation. Also in our opening remarks, we heard about how EXO's focus on redefining responsible travel and how this is rooted in respect and care. And when we talk about nature and nature conservation and animal welfare, of course, we're talking about caring for nature, caring for animals, respecting as well. But I think that also extends to everyone, people that are part of all of our efforts, right? So making sure that community members who currently may not be responsible, as you mentioned, but they want to improve. They may not have all the tools, but they want to. That we also interact with respect and care for everyone, including those that we want to support improve. So yeah, I think those are really great points, and I think that it's really great to be able to focus on all the positive energy that responsible travel in terms of opportunities that we have in our industry, because obviously I think that we sometimes get overwhelmed with the negatives, the problems that we're seeing, the challenges. Those are real and those are really important to be aware of. But it's also really helpful for us to see the positive side of opportunities and benefits that our industry brings. So Teresa, to go to you next, because I think that your work has also a lot to do with working with travelers, making sure that they're part of the solution as well. So yeah, please share from your perspective, in your example, what are some of the ways that responsible travel is supporting conservation?
Yeah, definitely. So, since we're focusing on marine environment, so we work closely with tour operators. So, like you said, businesses are important in the drive towards sustainability as well. So, we work with dive centers, eco-friendly snorkel guides. So, we have annual training and assessments for them, just for them to help them improve their daily operations to be more eco-friendly. So, for example, if you are a dive operator, scuba diving operator, or a snorkeling guide operator, trying to use mooring buoys instead of dropping anchors when you're bringing your guests out in the middle of the ocean. So, dropping anchors, you could accidentally drop it on coral reefs, and once they break, they take a very long time to regrow, right, and to rehabilitate that area. So those are just some examples. Another example is we work a lot with the local communities, small hotels and chalets. So for them to help them to improve their standards as well. So things like installing LED lights instead, just doing small efforts that your local mom and pop shops can afford to make such changes. We don't expect them to drastically overnight improve everything, but year on year they make small improvements that they can afford, and that helps as well. So we try to promote these businesses that we work with on the islands, for tourists to I guess experience as well. So one of the programs that we have on an island in Sabah is promoting homestays. So like for tourists to experience living in a village, for example, and they have some sort of cultural experience. So it's sort of a way for the local communities to get supplementary livelihoods as well. Not all of them have experience or have the skills in tourism, simple things like hospitality skills, how to host some guests. So we did some trainings for some islanders, and it's been successful. So year on year, they've been seeing their supplementary incomes increase, and it's mostly through word of mouth, maybe some old school Facebook advertising or posts that they get some of their customers. But it's been a good supplementary income for them. So these are just some of the examples that we've been working on.
Thank you. Yeah, I think going back to the power of travel, right? I think that our industry does have a very significant influence in terms of our ability to guide people to the more responsible choices that they can make, by first and foremost providing those choices, but also educating them about those choices that are available and making them available to them to choose. And that is power, that is important influence that we have on the choices that people are making in terms of where they spend money, and as you say, where the money goes to support local economy. So yeah, thank you for the example. And Chris, let's go to you. And also, in your example, you mentioned the community-owned and managed conservation efforts that you're part of. How is travel, responsible tourism? How is tourism part of the solution from your experience?
Thank you, Ayako. I think for all of us here, we want to make sure, whether it's our customers or ourselves, when we go away, we want to have the biggest impact possible in a positive way, whether that's on the environment or on the communities. At Jahu, we're aware, and I know that Ruby mentioned in a comment the concern of over-tourism. We're aware that we cannot have mass tourism at Jahu. We have to follow very strict guidelines led by the IUCN, best practice guidelines in how we manage our tours when it comes to great ape and lesser ape interaction or watching. So we keep our group sizes limited to no more than 6 or 7 guests at any one time on 1, 2, or 3-day tour options. So yes, we have the positive impact of the livelihoods that this creates. There's 24 community members that work at Jahu, from hospitality like cleaners, cooks, and guides, but also to our scout team that manage and protect the 700 hectares, and our team of very talented community researchers as well. But we needed to increase this positive impact, to have that ripple effect go through the community, so that when we have guests come to stay 1, 2, or 3 days, that the 187 families in the surrounding villages, that they all see the benefit. So one initiative that we started back in 2017 was we would take $30 from every ticket sold. So to every guest to Jahu, that $30 goes into a community development fund, or called a Gibbon Fund. This is managed by elected community representatives picked by community members themselves. And to date, there's been about $50,000 that's been raised through this initiative. This is money that the community have complete control over. We give them ideas, but this really comes from the ground up. They have a community meeting once a year. So they hear from the different families of where they feel that this money needs to go. And this committee, roughly each year, there's about $11,000 to $12,000. It's been increasing every year. 50% of this money they've agreed, and they use for community patrols. So this community, they are an indigenous group called the Benong, and they have legal representation and land rights awarded to them by the government. So they go on weekly patrols led by the community themselves to try to deter any land grabbing, any illegal logging or hunting. A portion of this funds also goes to training, per diems for them to go to meetings. It also goes to elderly support. So recently, the community just handed out food packages to around 37 of the village's most vulnerable members. So whether they are elderly, so 60 plus, or some families living below the poverty line as well. This money can also be used to support cultural ceremonies and representation. It's important that we recognize that these communities, a lot of the time, practice a form of animism. So a close connection to the natural world and a belief in the natural and supernatural spirits. So through this initiative, they can support ceremonies such as Benong New Year every April and Indigenous Peoples Day every August as well. So we really look to empower local leadership, not only in conservation, but also in community development and actions as well. And this is the power of tourism and the power of when people come to visit Jahu for 1, 2, or 3 days.
Thank you. That's really inspiring to hear how. And I think that it's great to hear these examples, because you are already making these connections between people and planet, nature, and communities really clear, and how those are really go hand in hand. Just a quick reminder to everyone who's listening, I forgot to mention this at the start. If you would like to ask any questions, please put it in the chat, and hopefully we'll have some time towards the end of the panel session to address and pick up some of your questions. We mentioned or we heard in the award ceremony part of the session about how all of this, what we're talking about, is a long-term effort. So it's a commitment, takes many years. Changes don't come overnight. And it's important to have perseverance so that we make progress over time. And part of that, and that's really the definition of sustainability, right? It's not a quick process that you achieve, but it's a continuous long-term process of working on improving. And an important aspect of that is measuring, because as they say, what you measure, you can manage. So in the examples that you all shared, what we would like to ask, and maybe you can highlight some aspects of, so what are some of the most important metrics that you are following? How are you measuring impact? What are some of the ways that you are tracking progress over time? What's most important to you in your work is our next question. Would anybody like to take that first, or Daniel, would you like to comment in terms of measurement, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I can provide the kind of
Yeah.
overarching elements rather than the specific case studies, which are clearly important. But I think you mentioned that there's a slow process. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury anymore. The cutoff date to reverse biodiversity loss is 2030. So not long. And I think it's a very quick decision for a business to make to commit to animals and nature. It's not a slow decision. And recognizing the order should be planet, people equals profit. That is actually the correct order of travel as far as identifying what supports the other. Because the people element are, as we've been hearing, really important, but they too rely on nature. And if practices are irresponsible or unsustainable, then you are causing business risk because the reliance on nature, the nature is not there, its services are not there. But equally, that goes for the local people in the destination. So this is a collective responsibility that is a quick decision to make. The process of how you do it, that might be a little bit more staggered, but as I say, we don't have very much time left. So everyone listening, if you're a business, then you absolutely need to have a policy commitment that commits you to both animal and nature protection, and importantly, a strategy. There's no point in just having a policy, a statement of purpose. What is actually going to deliver that statement of purpose against a realistic and hopefully positively impactful timeline of actions? So I think as far as, sorry, I just needed to make that really important point. There's no time left. As far as the sort of elements of measurement, the elements of I think assessment, that those are very clear. These are stated by the IPBES, which is the intergovernmental body focusing on biodiversity and ecosystems. They support government policies, and they're a bunch of scientists. I'm on that as well, and we advise policymakers on what they should be doing in relation to biodiversity. And so the focus needs to be on those drivers of biodiversity loss. So as I said before, not to try and do everything at once, plastics and decarbonization and looking at product procurement, and focus on identify how your business is contributing to those 5 drivers. So those are land and sea use. This is in order of harm. Land and sea use, the sourcing and use of natural resources, climate change. Recognize climate change is in the biodiversity bracket. Climate change, and not the priority either. Then there's pollution, and there are many forms of pollution we know, and then invasive alien species or non-native species. And so you have, as businesses, need to assess your activities against each of those drivers and identify where you have the greatest impacts. Animal welfare is in there. It's number 2. That's the use of natural resources and ensuring animals have a better and hopefully suitable environment to live in. And so that is the process. So the path is out. There's no real kind of choice in the matter. Read the Nature Positive Travel and Tourism report that Annie Mundial wrote with the World Travel and Tourism Council. All of the process is laid out, and we also have a toolbox that's linked to that report. You can find it on a link in the contents page, and that will take you through the process that you need to follow. So everything is there for you to lay out. This is not an unknown area. We have spent a lot of time and effort to establish a roadmap with some clear actions and deliverables. So I really encourage everybody to review that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. And also for highlighting this the reality that there is urgency in all of this as well, globally speaking. And I think that speaks to even more so to how important it is that we as a whole industry step up and use this power that we've been talking about, right, of creating impact and scaling and amplifying impact, and use this to a good use. And I think a starting point is really making sure that we are focusing on the right, relevant, meaningful impact. So thank you for those points. Yeah, but back to all of you as well. If you would like to highlight a few points about how you are tracking progress over time, measuring what kind of ways are you using to make sure that you're making the right kind of impacts over time. Teresa, would you like to share? Yeah, please do.
What Reef Check Malaysia do. So at the core of our work, we actually do reef health monitoring. So that gives the general overview of how the reefs are doing. And we go back to the exact same locations around the country every year. So currently we do about 300 different sites, and they're all located quite close to the islands that we work on. So we would know whether some of our interventions have been successful. So we track certain fish indicator species, live coral cover, as well as invertebrate species. So it gives us an overall health of how the ecosystems are doing, and also we identify some threats, like, for example, if there is increase in algae, perhaps there's sewage pollution happening. This is an example. So we get an overall health of how the reefs are doing, and that's how we track whether some of the interventions has been successful. And yeah, like you mentioned, we might not see the environmental impact over time, but over 3 to 5 years, we can definitely see them. So, for example, we've been tracking the health of reefs in Malaysia since we started in 2007, so that's 17 years worth of data. And obviously during COVID-19, we did do the surveys as well. You could see that the trend of the live coral cover actually increased for the 3 years. We had some lockdowns or restrictions on travel just because there's less human impact in general. Yeah, so that's how we track the impact.
Thank you. I think that your example really highlights for everyone the importance of tourism operators to collaborate. I think collaboration is one of the most important solutions that we have in our work, to collaborate with experts, collaborate with scientists, collaborate with organizations that are specialized in making sure, for example, in your case, monitoring the health of the places where they take tourists to and so on, so that as businesses, they can also make the right decisions about what they do. So yeah, thank you for that example. Ingrid, would you like to?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we also, to monitor and evaluate our work, we have annual meetings with our advisors. So our advisors, we don't just kind of make up what we think should happen at an elephant camp because we feel like doing this month. We are lucky enough to know some of the world's leading Asian elephant researchers based out of Chiang Mai University, the Smithsonian Institute, and several other universities around the United States and Europe. So we meet quite often informally. I met up with some of them just last month, but we formally meet up annually to go over our criteria to see if there's anything that we should be changing. So has there been any new research into stress in elephant welfare or environmental enrichment? What about saddles? What about riding? What is the local, the most updated evidence indicating? What have you guys found in the last 12 months or so? What's coming out? What are you publishing? So, you know, it's annoying to have to go through and change criteria, but that's science as well. Things change, you learn more. And we're lucky that more and more research is being done into elephant welfare. So that's one side that we kind of continually monitor and evaluate our work. But another side is looking at visitor management and satisfaction and survey results to see what these camps, what the feedback is like at these camps, because that's really important. It's visitor management for one thing. That's really important as a tourism organisation. And we also then talk to the mahouts who work there and the other staff that work there at the camps as well. So we'll get feedback from several different kind of elements of a tourism organisation to see how the elephant's been kept, of course, what's the culture like, and is everything ticking over okay? Yeah.
Thank you. Those are great examples of listening, which I think is sometimes neglected when we talk about community engagement and so on. Yeah, absolutely. It's great to know how you are regularly in touch, communicating, listening, making sure that you're learning from their input from the stakeholders. So thank you. Chris, would you like to also share a bit on this topic?
Yes, thank you. So for us, I mean, we have many different metrics that we record. And as I mentioned, JAHU is an active field research center that goes hand in hand with the ecotourism activities at JAHU. So our very talented team of researchers, led by our research manager, Helen Beru, they monitor not only the gibbons. We work with 5 gibbon groups, but we also do line transects for bird species and mammal species. So we're able to record if there are any species that have kind of come back. One such bird species, which twitchers are quite happy about, are the Germain's peacock pheasant. It was not recorded around our site for about 4 to 5 years. It was more often into the far kind of corners. This year was the first time that we've actually recorded this species come back. And now this goes hand in hand with efforts of our JAHU Forest Watch team. It's a team of scouts. They go out twice a week and they actively remove snares and traps that people lay on the forest floor for hunting. So this is another important metric that kind of goes in line with the species of wildlife, bird life, mammal life that we record at JAHU. So for example, last year, the team removed over 160 traps from the forest of JAHU. This year, that number is not looking to surpass 60. So already we're seeing a reduction. And this is collaborative efforts of increased communication with community members from our team, which highlights the importance of saving this biodiversity, saving species like the Germain peacock pheasant as well. I'm just going to focus a little bit specifically to gibbons, and an exciting metric that we're going to start recording in the new year is our research team are going to record or take fecal samples from 2 different gibbon groups. And we'll look to monitor the cortisol levels of these fecal samples. So look at their stress. So we're going to take samples of when we have guests following this group of gibbons for 1 hour in the morning. The team will also follow them. They work in pairs, and they'll take fecal samples when we don't have any guests following this group. And over the course of the year, we will monitor one group of gibbons that have the guests follow them periodically, compared to a different group of gibbons that have never had any guest interaction or have guests follow them. And so we're able to really put science behind it to see if we are having any sort of form of negative impact when we bring guests out into the forest and we follow these gibbons. Like, we're already strictly following IUCN best practice guidelines, but for us to kind of take this one metric, that could potentially change our whole operation. But for us, if it's successful and we show and can see that we do not have a negative impact, then we can really put science behind our best practice guidelines and the work that we do at Yahoo, and the negative impact, the positive impact that guests can have when they come to visit as well.
Thank you. I love the nerdiness of your scientific passion. The collection effort, which I'm sure that is absolutely super important. It's really, I think also for those of us who might not be really familiar with kind of the day-to-day work of what do these researchers and scientists do, right? It's really good to learn about some of it's not all glamour, as I understand. Hard work that goes into making sure that the work that you're doing works, that you can focus on positive impact for nature. And behind the scenes, as you highlighted today, there's so much work that goes into working on conservation that's more complex than we might see. So I think it's a really great opportunity for us, all of us, to be really highlighting that what goes into behind the scenes that we may not see as well when we just talk about sustainable tourism. So we do have a couple of really great questions that I saw in the chat. So I think that we will pick those up and hopefully we'll have we'll be able to wrap up in time. So the first question from Charlotte is, what has been challenging in, I guess, right, in your work, bringing tourism to conservation, or the other way around, like conservation and tourism, and achieving that balance? Has there been a conflict? Has there been a challenge in working on both? And if so, what has been some of your approaches to addressing those challenges?
I'd like to point out an elephant in the room, so to speak, with my work. And whatever, sorry, I couldn't resist it. Challenges working in elephant-based tourism in Southeast Asia has got to be the social license that has been lacking somewhat. So the marriage between Western tourism expectations versus the on-ground reality of Southeast Asia, kind of the emotion and the science, it's very hard to blend sometimes. So there's always been quite a negative expectation of Asian elephant tourism from certain demographics, certain tourism demographics. You probably are all aware of this. And so we've always gone through and we've really tried to just break those expectations wide open and to see, what, these are old fallacies and people need to rethink what it is, what these assumptions that they have that maybe existed 30 years ago but don't exist today. So responsible tourism in my field of work isn't just about educating Asian elephant camps how to provide better Asian elephant welfare. That's a really big part of it. But just as equally has been not just teaching the camps, but also teaching the visitors about cultural heritage, expectations, just social norms, and really, really basic stuff that when you live and work in Asia, you take for granted. But I'm sure you'd get through your office people complaining about things and you're like, what are you complaining about that for? That's normal. But you forget that it's not actually normal to an 18-year-old in Australia. Things like elephant ownership. Well, it's actually normal to own an elephant, and that's okay. And let's just help these people own elephants and work really, really well with their elephant, And do you ride a horse by any chance back home? Oh, camel, yeah, okay, that's all right. So let's just education, and that's what it really all comes down to on all levels of work. So that's definitely been the challenge. But there's actually even been a shift in the last 5 years. I've seen that responsible travel wasn't really talked about pre-COVID, or not significantly. And I've noticed that genuine responsible travel is being taken seriously, and it's more than just a buzzword, it's an action. And people are learning and willing to learn a lot more now. And to me, so hopefully we're overcoming that challenge.
Thank you.
I think one of the biggest challenges for the sector is actually policy. I mean, policy guides, absolutely, but also it can disrupt. So, for example, most tourism businesses are focused on climate action, so measuring their emissions and hopefully establishing a reduction plan over a period of time. And as I was saying before, carbon emissions may not be your biggest impact. So you're focusing lots of effort and people, time, money on reducing impacts that actually your impacts may be greater elsewhere. And that's not helping anyone, let alone the planet. So I think that, measuring and sort of identifying, measuring and prioritizing your impacts absolutely needs to be that kind of gradual approach, but approach that you actually drill into where the impacts are the greatest. And then the second point, from those that run projects in the field, and Annie Mondial, we have a platform that is our kind of social impact give back, is a platform called the Animal Protection Network, and we host and support NGOs across the world and projects across the world that offer that kind of build back opportunity. And what we do is we kind of vet the projects. There's no cost to this process, but we vet the projects to make sure that they deliver on what they say they deliver. And then we match make those projects with travel businesses that are looking for particular areas to invest in depending on their impacts. So the advice to the projects is really think about what solution you're providing to the business. So think about what the business need is. So whether they've got a big impact from a carbon emission perspective, does your project offer an opportunity to compensate for those emissions, as in absorbs and stores a lot of carbon. So if that is the case, then make sure that message is front and center in your delivery, because those are the things that the travel businesses are looking for. They're not necessarily going to know what, coral reefs should be understood, but I think just putting the delivery front and center, as in increasing biodiversity or protecting islands from sea surges, things like that. Put those messages front and center rather than necessarily what you believe is the key element for your project. Thanks.
Thank you. Just building on the first point you made about maybe making sure that you are kind of focusing on the right kind of impact, the right areas of your impact. In one of the training programs that I'm working on for destination organizations, in the topics around climate actions for tourism destinations, one of the things that some leading researchers have done to look at what are destinations doing, and a key message that came out of this is that we shouldn't focus on just doing more. Obviously, we all want to save carbon, reduce energy consumption, all of this. We shouldn't just focus on doing more of what we think we should be doing, but we should be focusing on relevant and meaningful actions. And because we also have limited amount of energy and resources to invest in the efforts that we want to. So yeah, I think that's a really important point
It's not just me saying this.
Yes.
This is what all the scientists are saying. This is what all the policy makers are saying, and Anime Mondiale is championing those key points and supporting and empowering the travel sector to do that, to really identify where their greatest harms are, and then to use their influences, as we've been hearing from my colleagues on the panel, is actually empowering those projects to sort of build back, whether that's better welfare for the people that rely on those animals, from Ingrid's point, or whether that is building back natural processes, natural habitats and protected species and all of that. So it is really about an intelligent way of doing things. It ensures greater impact in the shorter period of time, and that makes business sense. So that's the way forward.
Thank you. But back to the question though, and Chris and Teresa, if you think of maybe any challenges that you face in working with tourism or combining or incorporating tourism into conservation, has there been any I guess difficulties in doing so? Has focusing on tourism kind of sometimes not aligned with your priorities in your research or conservation efforts and so on? Do you have any examples that you would like to share?
I mean, the third part of that is community. I believe like the biggest challenge is if the community don't get behind the project, whether that's, for us, conservation and tourism aligned, if there's no buy-in from local community and they don't see real value in what's going on at Jahu, then you cannot complete conservation or tourism goals or initiatives. Like, you fall at the first hurdle. You really do need buy-in. And a lot of that is just down to communication. So it's by not only coming from an outsider's perspective on explaining why that initiatives like Jahu are worth fighting for, or why there is value behind them, but this has to come from the community themselves. So from certain members of our staff, they've done a fantastic job at really outreaching certain families to explain the benefits, that even though they might not have direct employment or benefit at Jahu, but these are the additional benefits that they see through the community fund, through the safeguarding of their indigenous ancestral land as well, and through the preservation of cultural ceremonies and celebrations. Because if there's no real need to protect 700 hectares of forest, and if it's worth more when it's turned into a cashew plantation or cassava, you just have to show that there's real value when these trees stay around. So I think for us, the challenge is really over the years, and we've seen big success in the last 2 to 3 years, but just getting the community on board and having them not just as beneficiaries, but as full partners. I think that's key.
Thank you. Teresa?
I guess from our observation, and to be honest, like a lot of community members, they obviously some of their priorities is obviously to feed their families, right? So they need to get an income. So we totally understand, like obviously tourism is a huge source of income, but sometimes there might be like I think Ruby mentioned, there might be over tourism, right? So I think the challenge is trying to find a balance that the local community can still earn a decent income to support their families, but also not to have like over tourism where it might impact the environment and impact their future livelihoods. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and I think one of the solutions might roll out to the second question that we have in the chat box, like what can like travel agencies or travelers can do, right? I guess it's just to provide there's a better choice, a better option for eco-friendly options. Sometimes they might not be aware, right? That some tourists might not be aware there's an option like this, or what their impact of traveling there could bring. And it's just perhaps giving people options, maybe explaining why we choose responsible tourism, or why we should have sustainable tourism options, and what maybe paying a little bit more can have a bigger impact, right, for their choices. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so building off of that, because I think the question that Alex and Dia had, what can tourism operators do? What can tourism businesses like EXO and other leaders in this space can do more to support nature and people? I think this is a great question to kind of wrap up. So thinking big, dreaming big, what would you be your one or two some of the biggest wishes for tourism companies to support even more, do even more in supporting your work? Quick answers from everyone.
Yes, I would say I think that every tour operator, every tourism association, every Southeast Asian country needs to be proud of their Asian elephant, human-elephant relationship and be loud and proud of what you have and all those really excellent places that are doing excellent conservation and responsible tourism work. Don't shy away from it. Be loud and proud of your elephants.
Thank you. Yeah, no, pride, community pride, local pride. I think that is an important element of all of this sustainability that we're talking about. So thank you for highlighting that. And tourism companies can do a lot in promoting that because storytelling is what we do through travel. So
I'd like to follow on from that. I know, and again, Ingrid and everyone over the last few years, fantastic support for kind of like what is responsible and ethical elephant tourism. But it would be great as the years coming to have that same focus for gibbons. What are the do's and don'ts of gibbon tourism? What does ethical gibbon tourism mean? Gibbons are right across South and Southeast Asia. And so I think it would be great if we could all work together, the different travel companies, tour agents, and partners, and that we can really set the groundwork. In the past, there's a lot of focus on great ape tourism, bonobos, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans. So I feel like it would be really beneficial for gibbons to kind of share some of the limelight and work together to have the do's and the don'ts of gibbon tourism and what is responsible tourism for gibbons.
I love that. And I think, sorry, I think, Chris, because as part of the prize that you've received, you're going to be doing some gibbon advocacy, I think. So we look forward to hearing more about that in the prize.
I think for me the biggest need, the next steps, so to speak, is joining the dots, and I'd actually like to invite Chris to send me all his aspirations in relation to gibbons, and we will escalate that to the global travel sector. So there's your opportunity. But I think
thank you so much.
That's what it's all about. It's about listening, it's about understanding, it's about joining the dots between all of the good work that is happening globally, and also the dots between the different kind of entities. So what we are doing is joining the dots between the conservation community and the travel and tourism community, encouraging them to have some dialogue, because that in itself is a challenge, and to actually recognize the synergies between the two and to really empower those synergies. So we actually speed up the process of understanding the conservation, but also the animal welfare need, and how travel and tourism can support that, whether it's minimizing or maximizing or both. And to really use their influences and to direct their revenues at where those problems are the greatest. So that, for me, communication is the thing that is the most needed thing to actually see meaningful change.
Thank you. And Teresa, you already highlighted your point about communication as well, and what tourism companies can do. Would you like to add to the wish list as well? Do you have a species that you're passionate about as well?
I guess one of the things could be on the wish list could be maybe some travel agencies could highlight community-based ecotourism. I know a lot of island communities, they do like maybe small-scale tours or experiences in their villages, and maybe they don't get as much publicity out there as bigger resorts, bigger tour agencies. So maybe wherever you're working at, if you can maybe try to find some small local-based community projects or efforts in tourism that you could support and promote, that would be great.
Thank you. And I think that is a really great a few last words to bring to this panel to wrap up, because I think that really speaks to the whole mission of this whole sustainability award program by EXO, really making an effort to highlight those that may otherwise not be highlighted, the great work that's being done across Asia that are making a difference for local communities. So again, I would like to wrap up the panel first and foremost by thanking you, our great panelists. Thank you for sharing your insights and examples, ideas, and inspiration with this great group of people who are here today, as well as thanking the organizers of this great program, everyone who's been involved in the award program, this ceremony and session today, for the work that's being done to highlight great stories of local conservation efforts. So thanks again, everyone, and back to you, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ayako. Thank you, everyone. What an incredible and insightful discussion we've just had. Huge thank you to start with to our panelists for sharing their insights, and to Ayako for leading the way in the discussion. To wrap it up, I think we can say that these discussions are just a reminder of the impact we can achieve when we come together with a shared vision for responsible tourism and conservation. I'd also like to thank all of you who have joined us today. For us, these awards and discussions are about more than celebrating achievements. They're about inspiring and encouraging action. So let's continue working together to ensure that travel does not only inspire, but also protects and preserve. Thank you, and I look forward to next year's Sustainability Awards.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.